The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Justin Fields gives the Jets a big scare.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast.
The Jets got a big scare yesterday as Justin Fields suffered an injury during the team's second practice of training camp in 2025. On today's show, we are going to talk about all the implications of Fields' injury. And if you're a Jets fan, I hope you were away from the internet yesterday morning because it was a nerve-wracking time. I will tell you, I was going for a walk. I was walking to grab a bagel at the local bagel place, and I checked my phone, and I saw the news. Justin Fields limped off the field and was taken to the locker room at the team facility in a cart. And my first thought was, well, if he was able to hop off the field under his own power, and he was sitting in the passenger seat of the cart, so he wasn't on the back of the cart, maybe he's okay. But then my mind started to wander, and I remembered 2 years ago on opening night, Aaron Rodgers also walked off the field on his own power and hopped on the cart when he suffered his torn Achilles injury. And then speculation ran wild over the next couple of hours. In fact, there was a tweet by a fake Adam Schefter account, and that's it's one of the issues we deal with in the world we live in, where there are fake accounts out there who people believe are real, fake insider accounts in the NFL who tweet out news that is not accurate. And this fake Adam Schefter account posted speculation that Fields may have torn his Achilles tendon. And all I could do when I saw that, and this started to pick up steam, and people were saying Schefter said this. Schefter really did not say it. It was a fake Schefter account. I just thought about how ridiculous it would be. For the second time in 3 years, the Jets were about to lose their starting quarterback for the season due to an Achilles injury. And that's just in the last 3 years. I mean, if you think about Jets history, it's unbelievable the number of times the Jets have suffered a critical quarterback injury, either in training camp, in the preseason, or early in the season, that has thrown a season off course. I mean, we could go back to 2022 when Zach Wilson suffered an injury in the first preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I know it's silly to look back and act like Zach Wilson getting hurt was a big deal, but in the context, he was a second-year quarterback. He was really the hope of the team at that point. And the backup quarterback was Joe Flacco, who, has had an excellent career and went on to have some pretty good days with the Cleveland Browns, but a guy whose best days are clearly behind him. You could go back to 2013, Mark Sanchez going down in the preseason game against the New York Giants, which forced the Jets to put Geno Smith into the lineup. And again, you could say, well, how big of a deal is losing Sanchez? Maybe it's not that big of a deal. It still forced the Jets to put in a quarterback who wasn't ready into the starting lineup. Go back to 2015, the famous Geno Smith incident when Ike Enikapali punched him in the locker room, pushing Ryan Fitzpatrick into the starting line. Now, again, Fitzpatrick ended up having a good year, but there were also years where a quarterback injury really derailed the Jets. 2003, Chad Pennington suffers an injury in a game against the Giants in the preseason. Jets were coming off a division championship season. There were big things expected of the Jets in 2003. They ended up going 6-10. 2 years later, Pennington goes down in week 3 against Jacksonville. And then his backup, Jay Fiedler, goes down on the same series. And that pretty much derailed that season. Jets ended up going 4-12. And then the ultimate Jets quarterback injury, 1999. The Jets are coming off an AFC championship game berth. And the team they lost to in the AFC championship game, Denver, is clearly taking a step back because John Elway retired. There's nobody standing between the Jets and the Super Bowl. And in the second quarter of the first game of the season, Vinny Testaverde suffers a non-contact injury, an Achilles again. So this could be our third Achilles injury derailing a season in the last 30 years. I mean, how unbelievable would that have been? And I think if you're a Jets fan, you have your guard up right now because nothing ever goes right for this team. And look, on this podcast, we break down what goes wrong with the Jets. And a lot of it's the Jets' fault. A lot of it's the Jets hiring the wrong people. A lot of it's the Jets making all the wrong decisions. A lot of it's the owner who doesn't know what he's doing. But a lot of it's also just ridiculous bad luck. I mean, who trades for a future Hall of Fame quarterback and it gets hyped up all offseason and then watches that quarterback suffer a season-ending injury 4 plays into the season? The Jets do. And what other possible team that after all this happens could lose their next quarterback for the season in the second practice of training camp? And, whenever big Jets news breaks during the day, I start thinking through like what I'm going to say on the podcast. And usually on this podcast, we get to one of two emotions. Now, I always try and be hopefully I give you something to think about, but ultimately you probably land in one of two places. You either land on joy or you land on anger. You're either happy with something the Jets do, or more likely because of the way the Jets have operated, you're angry at something the Jets do. But if something had happened to Justin Fields, the emotion just would have been sadness, because during that stretch where it seemed like Fields had suffered a serious injury, I was just sitting down and, I got my bagel and I was eating my bagel. So the injury didn't stop me from getting to the bagel place on my walk and having my bagel. But I just sat there thinking, what am I going to say to people? Like, what justification do you have for continuing to support this team that breaks your heart over and over? Whenever you think something good can happen, something bad pops up. And I started thinking about, where we are right now as Jets fans. And, this is the first year of a new head coach and new GM. And that's usually a time of great optimism. You're really excited because you've probably gotten rid of a crew that wasn't working. But even though you've had some rough times in the recent past, you've turned the page. You've moved on to a new regime. There's new hope in the building. But for Jets fans, I think we've just been through that over and over and over. And we've been hopeful over and over and over that there's reluctance. I mean, I think there are people who are cautiously optimistic about Aaron Glenn and Darren Mucci. I count myself among them. I think that there was a lot of good that came through the first offseason. In fact, I would even say there were some decisions that indicate these guys may be different from the past Jets regimes that we've had that have not been so successful. But as a Jets fan at this point, after 14 straight years of no playoffs, after 9 straight years of no winning seasons, you're just expecting things to go bad. And whenever you let your guard down for a second, and look, I don't even think Justin Fields is going to be that great, but he's the quarterback of this team. There's hope around him. He's an interesting project. He's got upside, and to watch it potentially all go out the window and the second track as a training camp, that would have been too much to bear. Well, fortunately, the news came out that it's not that serious, and the news just kept getting better as we progressed through the day. At the end of practice, Glenn indicated that it was a toe injury. So you went from thinking, okay, maybe is it Achilles, is it an ACL? No, it's just a toe injury. Still, though, toe injuries can linger, especially if it's something like turf toe. Then the news came out that it wasn't turf toe, it was a dislocated toe, and then later on, still news came out that Fields is day-to-day, that this is not something that's really going to derail him even in his training camp. So a big sigh of relief. But this whole episode just shows how vulnerable we all are right now, because you have to have your guard up constantly with this team. And fortunately, this time we caught a break. It wasn't the devastating injury that we all feared. So maybe that's a good sign. Maybe for once, the Jets finally caught a little bit of a break. It's crazy to say, like, when your quarterback suffers an injury the second day of training camp, you caught a break. But if you had told me during that whole saga that the end result would be Justin Fields suffered a dislocated toe in his day-to-day, and they think he's going to be ready to go week 1 against the Steelers, which they do, I would have signed up for that in a second, because that seemed like just beyond reasonable at that point. It felt like it was another classic Jets heartbreak moment before the season even began. So maybe this is a good sign. Maybe this is a sign that things are finally starting to go our way. But we're all going to have our guard up until we find that out for sure. Ahead on the Locked On Jets podcast, let's talk about the quarterback who replaced Fields running the first team offense on Thursday after Fields left, and that's Tyrod Taylor. And if anything happens to Tyrod Taylor during the season, if anything happens to Justin Fields during the season, Tyrod Taylor will take over. The Jets have expressed confidence in him. And in all honesty, it's possible if Taylor's the better quarterback than Fields.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
We got an old-fashioned staring contest between the Golden State Warriors and Jonathan Kuminga's camp. We got a JK staring contest to talk about. This is updated news to get into. We have the botched business of this whole thing. The Golden State Warriors have plenty of blame to be placed on them. This is not just point your finger at Jonathan Kuminga. It goes both ways. And then we're going to talk fun things, Western Conference, sleepers, teams that could be fun. We may even get into the East. The world is our oyster, Hudson. Let's talk a little JK to start things off. Are you ready to dive into some second apron and apron talk and all the financials that make this thing so fun?
I mean, I was listening up to my guy, Bobby Marks, right before I hopped on just to make sure I had my T's crossed and my I's dotted. But yeah, you need to be like an astrophysicist to really know the ins and outs of this damn thing. But yeah, let's give it a shot.
The reason I got into sports is because I couldn't remember anything else in school. You know, I couldn't do anything. I had to have flashcards for anything and everything. And sports was just something that came natural. And I feel like with this damn second apron stuff, I need the open book test at all times. It's just, it is a little confusing. But basically, Jonathan Kuminga, to put this out there for, my dummies book, Jonathan Kuminga for Dummies, he wants a fit, he wants dollars, but the Warriors have just about all the leverage in this situation. The leverage that Kuminga has is that he could technically wreck the Warriors title window by being a distraction, refusing to play ball, refusing to really sign anything until that qualifying offer date, which I believe is October 1st. And at that point, I mean, maybe someone picks up Melton, maybe someone goes after Horford, or he just says, you know what, forget this. It's a mess. I'm retired. Not necessarily leverage that helps Jonathan Kuminga's career, but his entire leverage is basically screwing the Golden State Warriors, because even if he does sign the qualifying offer, they lose him next year for nothing. The Warriors do want some value in return. So the divorce seems likely, but the issue is the Warriors have now thrown out a contract to Jonathan Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga said, I am good to go. And he doesn't mind, per the sources, waiting as long as this thing needs to get settled. Meanwhile, we as content creators, can we please expedite this process just a little bit? But Kuminga basically says, I don't think that contract's fair. The Warriors on the other side say, we offer the highest starting salary that you're going to get. There's not a lot of teams with cap space that can offer you anything else. But his agent's going to continue to look for sign-in trades. The Suns and the Kings are the two teams that have showed some interest. Unfortunately, they have nothing to offer the Warriors, or at least that they would offer the Warriors, that Golden State wants. And the issue with this entire thing is that Al Horford is reportedly on standby because of this. Because if they commit their $5 million mid-level exception to Horford, then the transaction hard caps them at the second apron and potentially makes it possible for a team to swoop in and throw an offer sheet for Kuminga that the Warriors can't match, losing him for nothing. So the Warriors don't necessarily want Jonathan Kuminga. They just want something for him. Jonathan Kuminga just wants to play basketball. He wants some money. It's a disaster all around, man. As a non-biased party here, what do you make of this entire situation?
I mean, the writing was on the wall. This should have just been done beforehand. Now they're sitting in a spot where they're at a stalemate. Like you said, I mean, they got 9 guys on the roster, I believe, right now. They got to sign, 4 or 5 guys, and they're sitting here going, with their, finger up their butts. Like, what do we do? Mike Dunleavy, it's like, dude, you could have seen this coming. There was clearly a clash with Steve Kerr and Kuminga. He wants to be a go-to guy in the playoffs if that were to happen with whatever team he lands on. And now they're sitting there and all these other teams are already moving all the puzzle pieces around. It's like, where do you go? Where's the fit? I saw Keon Ellis get thrown out there from the Kings, but it's like, you could have, his value was much higher at one point before other teams made their moves. So it's it's not a great spot to be in. It's really their only piece that they can move right now is Jonathan Kuminga.
Yeah, and the doomsday scenario is basically the one where a team comes in with an offer sheet that the Warriors can't match, and they then have to move around pieces like a Buddy Hield's $9 million contract goes somewhere else to bring in a $5 million contract or something to make financials work in that sense. But the issue is that basically, let's say Kuminga signs a $25 million deal elsewhere in a sign and trade. His incoming salary for the new team counts at the full value. The outgoing salary only counts at 50%. So that means with $12.5 million of outgoing value there, the most that the Warriors can take back the salary match, that's where it gets a little bit iffy with all these aprons and everything that's involved. It is confusing stuff. There's no doubt about it. And the Warriors have to go with some vet minimum contracts, and maybe it's Will Richard on the rookie minimum that could be $1.3 million, but they do not have a lot of money to throw around right now. In fact, they have 9 players on contract for $171 million. They are required to roster at least 14 players, so they have to sign 5 more by the start of the season. Horford is presumed to be $5.7 million mid-level exception. D'Anthony Melton presumed to be a $2.3 million minimum. That's 11 players. They would still need 3 more, and the Warriors would sit at $17 million below the first apron, $28.9 million below the second apron. Do you understand any of this when I'm throwing all these words at you, aprons and everything? Like, I wonder if any of our viewers, this naturally just like clicks to them and they're like, oh, the aprons, I get it. Or if this is just damn confusing to everyone.
No, dude, it's confusing to guys that cover the league consistently. You know, like Zach Lowe is like, I'm getting confused by the aprons. Really, the second apron, to make it simple, it's just look at it like a hard cap. No team is going to enter the season over the second apron. I mean, just call it the hard salary cap. I know they hate putting the word salary cap on anything, but no team is going to go over that second apron. I think like the Cavaliers and Celtics might technically be, as it stands today. They'll make some moves. The one silver lining, if you're a Warriors person, I've heard so many situations where they're like, there's just no way out. You're like, hey, with all these contracts, the John Wall contract comes to mind. They can't figure a way out. These guys are smart. They figure out how to finagle the salary cap or the second apron, first apron, whatever you want to call it. And they end up making moves by being, they do something where they, stretch a contract, things like that. That's above our pay grade, Chuck. And they figure something out to make it work and move these pieces. So that's really what you can hold on to, is that somebody smarter than us is putting together something that's going to make sense for the Golden State Warriors, because they're in a tough spot right now. No doubt about that.
Sticky situation, you could call it. The past business has been botched. Hopefully the future business is better.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks.
Thrilled to be joined here on the show by Jake Butt of the Big Ten Network, former tight end at Michigan. We will talk about Oregon's tight end because he's all fired up.
I'm on the
about
Mackey board. I'm on the Mackey board. So,
hey, listen to that.
My voice does carry weight, believe it or not.
That's why we brought him on the show mostly. It's just to start the Kenny and Sadiq hype train. But I want your thoughts on Oregon coming into this season off a Big Ten championship. You're not as close to the program maybe, or don't talk about it every day like I do. So what's your kind of 30,000-foot view of where you think the Ducks are coming into this year?
Well, first off, I'm excited. We don't get our full season schedule, but I will have the opener against Montana State at home. So,
and apparently that's going to be a barn burner of a game, because we learned at Idaho last year blowouts are not guaranteed.
Up in the booth, we always like competitive games. It gives us something to talk about, but I understand the fan. I don't know. Montana State's a good program.
Really
They're
good.
Going to come
really,
to play,
really good.
And that's their Super Bowl, their national title. But, I mean, it's just going to be the truth. You can ask me this question this year, next year, as long as Dan Lanning's there, probably for the foreseeable future, like Oregon's here to stay. Before the Big Ten expanded out west, you talk about the top of the conference, and it was Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and then there's, some teams that would get in the mix. Now it's Oregon. That name is right in there firmly, and coming off an undefeated season, you win the Big Ten, and I think people were concerned, like, hey, does Oregon will they have to adapt to the Big Ten? I watched the tape last year, and Oregon is so good, and it's going to be the case once again. They dictate the terms of the game. Teams have to adapt to them, and that's the state of the program. To me, it seems like, if I had to bet, defense will probably lead the way, right, this year. You're breaking in a new quarterback, and that's obviously going to be a topic of conversation, but I don't have concerns about that. I look at Bo Nix, the strides he took coming to Oregon and getting in this system. Completion percentage significantly jumped, even a jump in year 2 when he went on that Heisman campaign. I expect the same for Dante Moore, once that's confirmed. But to me, it looks like this is going to be a defensive-led team. Thieneman, love him. What you guys did in the transfer portal, the secondary, love him. Uyunglele across the defensive line, maybe one of the best, if not the best pass rusher. There's no weaknesses. And then the offensive line is going to be the foundation and stability of the offense as you're introducing a new quarterback and introducing some of these new faces outside.
Yeah, in the Big Ten landscape, there was a preseason poll recently that picked Oregon third, which is where I have them in my preseason Big Ten rankings. And I have Penn State first and Ohio State second. Do you think that's an appropriate place for those teams to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd even give credit to Illinois. I think they're firmly in the mix.
They are my preseason number 4 team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, that should be everybody's top 4 right there. Absolutely. Illinois is a team that's extremely experienced. Also, returning both coordinators is key. You're out here Big Ten Media Days.
Yeah.
You're asking the head coaches about new coordinators. You're learning a new language, a new system. So having coordinator continuity is key. But right there, number 3. Any of those 3, 4, 5 teams has a chance to compete for a title.
Does it surprise you that Oregon came into the Big Ten and won it in their first year and is, just kind of immediately expected to be at the top of the conference every year in your view?
Doesn't surprise me at all. And, it's an arms race in today's landscape, and it takes commitment, it takes alignment. Oregon has the resources. They have the leader in Dan Lanning. I think having a younger coach is extremely valuable in today's landscape from a recruiting standpoint, being able to communicate and relate to guys in the portal. So it does not surprise me. I think there's going to be many, many more years to come for success. And ultimately, Oregon's going to want to win a national championship. That's just the truth. So there's only one team that wins that every year. So that can't mean when you fall short of the national championship that it becomes a disappointing year. That was a phenomenally great year.
That can be a tough sell to Oregon fans sometimes, but I get it.
But it takes time. Jim, my time at Michigan, we had some really good teams and fell short. It took time to get over that ledge. Even Ryan Day with Ohio State, it took time. Kirby Smart at Georgia, it took time. I would choose to look at the positive and say they have the systems in place that allow them to have a chance at the end of the year. There's going to come a point in time where they get over the hump.
The Big Ten, like the Pac-12, RIP, as it used to be, has just got so much history and tradition and just a really, really strong football culture. And you see a lot of that every single year. How do you think Oregon's entrance into the Big Ten with last season and what they're expected to do this year, how is that kind of being received in Big Ten country?
I think it's welcomed, and even just past Big Ten country. Who doesn't want to watch Ohio State, Oregon? Who wasn't sitting there on the edge of their seat, watching that game? Who isn't excited to see a rivalry, Oregon State, or even Oregon-Washington, the competitive game there at the end of the season? From a branding standpoint, I'd actually even kick it back to you. Like, when I think of Oregon Ducks, I think of speed, sexy uniforms.
Yeah.
Growing up now with the college football games back in place, everyone wanted to play with Oregon because of the speed and the uniforms. I'd even just kick it to you. Like, what is something that Big Ten fans should know about Oregon from a historical standpoint?
Well, I think that when you look at all the changes that college football's undergone in the last 15 to 20 years, whatever has been required, Oregon has adapted. You come into the Big Ten, the narrative in that conference is, hey, it's about physicality, it's about toughness, and Oregon goes out and wins the league. And when it was, the facilities race in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, Oregon was right there at the forefront. And the uniforms, that's something that Oregon, of course, really, really started and has been a major recruiting tool. I talk to Brian Smith, our recruiting guy here at the Locked On Network, all the time. Mm-hmm. And, I'll say, like, what does someone in Alabama recruit like Naeem Offord? I don't know if it's Naeem specifically, but just as an example, like, what does a kid from that part of the country know about Oregon uniforms every time, right? Like, it's an identifier.
It does matter.
Yeah, it does.
It really does matter.
For all the flack and crap that Oregon and Oregon fans have taken from, mostly Washington and Oregon State fans, I think over the years, USC as well, for all that, like, they did it for a reason. It has clearly worked. And then you get to the NIL and the transfer portal era, and Oregon's a top-tier NIL school, and Oregon's having a lot of success in the transfer portal. They still recruit high school kids really well. Like, whatever change you've thrown at Oregon in college football, they've just kind of been there. And so, there's a bill that might go through Congress that could change college sports again, and the NIL, like, there's just all this stuff. And frankly, I get exhausted trying to keep up with it on Locked On College Football. Yeah. It can be exhausting, quite frankly, but it matters. But I don't have any worry as an Oregon fan, because I look at it and go, every single change, and they haven't all been the same. Whatever's been needed, Oregon's going to adapt. You're going to a more physical conference. Here's an offensive line that can, hold up against Abdul Carter and Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. Here's a defensive line that can, cause enough havoc to beat the eventual national champions, right? Like they always have shown an ability to just adapt to wherever the landscape of college football goes.
Adaptability is key, and I said this last year, and I don't know if I said it as clear when I was calling the Maryland game, which is, Oregon, you thought, and this didn't mean Oregon wasn't tough or physical, but a decade ago when you thought Oregon, you think speed and finesse, right?
And I think that was fair. I think
they do it all now, though.
Yeah,
the speed and finesse is still there, but there was a brand of physicality, and maybe that's a value of having a defensive-minded head coach, too. There was a brand and a physicality that showed up on tape. The only area you guys are missing, better airport. We need a better airport, because if it matters for us as analysts, the recruits, too, we need a...
Do you fly into Eugene or Redmond?
I've done both. Okay. And even Portland, I want to say, I might have done Portland.
The Redmond airport... I find to be phenomenal.
Okay.
I
don't think I did the Redmond.
So Redmond is so easy, man. I'm telling you, security is 5 minutes.
How far is it from campus?
Maybe like an hour and a half or so, roughly. So it's a
check it out.
Yeah, it's a little.
Week 1 game.
Yeah, it's a little bit further. I can't let you go before asking about Kenyon Sadiq, because I think the entire Oregon fan base, I talked about him earlier this week on the show. I've talked about him a lot in the offseason. Dan Lanning told Eric Skopel the other day that, he's someone who he sees as being a focal point of the offense. Like, Oregon has sneakily been really good at the tight end position over the years. Terrence Ferguson, Ed Dixon, Johnny Munt had a nice career in the NFL. Farrell Brown as well.
Farrell Brown. I mean, what a great story, too.
Oh, awesome that he came back. And I'm pretty sure he's still bouncing around the NFL.
I saw him at tight end university,
Yeah. So Kenyon Sadiq is different than all of those guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's what is so exciting, is he just learned from one of the best tight ends Oregon's ever had, who was a second-round pick in Terrence Ferguson. And he brings an athletic profile that is, they run tunnel screens and fly sweeps to this guy.
Yeah.
But then you can watch him, one of my favorite moments of his in the Big Ten championship game was not one of his touchdowns. He came across on a wham block and put Abdul Carter on his rear end. And it's that's a top 10 pick in the NFL draft.
Yeah.
And he can do all that sort of stuff. So when you watch someone who played tight end and maybe wasn't exactly like Kenyon Sadiq, when you watch him, what is so special to you?
I was going to say, I did, not to toot my own horn, I did win the Mackey, but I had no type of, it looked completely different to what, I wasn't hurdling people. I wasn't running past people. But he's explosive, and he's got such a unique skill set that I think one of the big positives is you have a play caller that has the creativity to know how to use a weapon like that in Coach Stein, because you could truly line him up anywhere. He could be a slot receiver. He could line up as the solo receiver backside. He can line up in the backfield as a fullback. You could give him a toss, honestly. You could do like a tight end reverse, like what we've seen with Kittle. He's just that athletic, and I do think he's got a chance to compete for the Big Ten tight end of the year and win a Mackey, especially considering you guys, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden to the NFL, right? You lose Evan Stewart. I understand you brought in some transfers, a couple 5-star freshmen. The roster is loaded with talent. But in terms of a proven known commodity, it's Kenyon Sadiq right now. That is that, and also introducing a new quarterback. Just naturally, our routes, we line up attached to the tackle. So at the top of our routes as a tight end, I'm saying you end up closer to the quarterback, right? Instead of, if you're on the right hash and you have, someone running a 15-yard stop route, that's a 40-yard pass through the air from hash to outside the numbers. If you're running a tight end, you're running a 10-yard out. That's only really a 15-yard pass. It's much more available and friendly to a new quarterback that you're introducing. So I'm excited for him. He's going to put up big-time numbers. I love that they're talking about him as a focal point of the offense. So I will start the Kenyon Sadiq Mackey train week 1. That's my challenge to him, 100 yards. If we can get to 100 yards, I'll start the Kenyon Sadiq Mackey train very early, if not right now. That's
what we love to hear. I feel like Dante Moore will see him early on, maybe as a security blanket, and depending on where he lines up, I think there can be, there's a joke in the NFL of Kirk Cousins used to chuck it up. Screw it, Justin Jefferson's down there somewhere. I think I would love to see just a couple of those balls to Kenyon Sadiq, because He's
Why
six.
not?
I mean, he's 6'4". He's up to about 250 pounds. He's still athletic. He
Man, is he compact?
He can,
and strong.
oh my
too.
gosh, yeah. I mean, we've been seeing him walking around. You wouldn't really know. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily look 250 until you stand like right next to him. You're like, wow, that's just a unique sort of physical profile. So
Yeah.
the Kenyon Sadiq hype train will be started by this guy right here, Jake Butt, Big Ten Network.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for
Yep.
stopping
Thank
by.
you.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Gametime Zone Deals pick the best deals in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concerts and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Christian Wilkins started training camp on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform. Now he has been informed of his release.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast.
It is all about Christian Wilkins. If you didn't know, now you know. We'll jump right into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, it was wild. I was on my radio show on Thursday. It was almost over. It's 4:30. I know we were about to go to commercial. No joke, Raider Nation. We were about to go to commercial. I was about to tee up and tease the next segment and throw out the phone number to get some calls and texts and everything. And then all of a sudden I saw this tweet from Adam Schefter. And so before we went to commercial, I said, wait, hold on, I got to read. So in real time, and look, I'm a guy who talks a lot, as you know. Anyone who has listened to this show for a day, 20 days, 20, whatever, you know what I mean? For the longest time, you know I like to talk. I was at a loss of words when I saw this tweet from Adam Schefter come rolling down. ESPN sources, Raiders are releasing defensive tackle Christian Wilkins with the designation of terminated vested veteran. His time in Las Vegas is now over. Due to how Wilkins treated the rehab from his foot injury he suffered last season, the Raiders voided the remaining $35.2 million of guaranteed money left on Wilkins' contract last month, and today Wilkins filed a grievance with the NFLPA. I literally had to read that about 4 times. One, to make sure that wasn't a fake Adam Schefter tweet, right? You know, there's so many of those fake accounts out there. And then I had to process it, but I'm trying to relay it on the radio in real time. Like right now, I'm able to do it and say it smoothly, but I must have messed those words up about 5 times as I was trying to read it, just because, again, didn't believe it. Everything that we had heard, or everything that I had heard, at least, I don't want to speak for everybody, but everything that I had heard is that he was actually pretty close to coming back, and there was a chance that he could be available before, you know, the 4th game of the season, somewhere in between week 1 and week 4. That was some sounds and some thoughts that I had been getting from other people, and, well, clearly that was not the case. So Schefter went on another tweet and said, with the Raiders voiding the remainder $35.2 million in guaranteed money left on Christian Wilkins' contract last month, and Wilkins filing agreements with the NFLPA today, this is a situation that is far from over. The NFLPA had 50 days to file agreements on behalf of Christian Wilkins after the Raiders voided the money of guaranteed money in his contract on June 4th. $8 million for this year, $27.25 million for next year. The grievance was filed this morning. A legal battle awaits. So this is a situation that's probably going to get really ugly between the NFLPA, between the Raiders. Obviously, there's going to be lawyers involved. And I thought Adam Hill of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, he's also part of my sister station here in Las Vegas, ESPN Las Vegas. He tweeted this out. About to see the first real test of the new NFLPA regime, as the Christian Wilkins saga is probably going to get wild. Wilkins, on a side note, was the Raiders player rep. So the player rep for the Raiders when it comes to the NFLPA was Christian Wilkins. Now, obviously, they're going to have to find another guy, but the NFLPA is going to get involved. And, you know, I've been bringing up on the show everything that's been going on in the situation between the NFL and the NFLPA and how it was getting messy, and there was a lot of layers to it. Now, this is just going to add to it. And as Adam Hill said, it's really going to test the strength of the NFLPA at this stage of the game. Also, to Sean Reed from The Athletic, during the offseason, the Raiders determined that defensive tackle Christian Wilkins needed another procedure in order for his injured left foot to heal. per source. Wilkins disagreed, sparking a dispute that ultimately led to his release. So remember, he suffered this injury in week 5, right? He had the surgery in October, and now we're looking at the end of July, and he's still not ready to go. All offseason, we've been talking about in a boot, out of a boot, out of a boot, in a boot, what's going to happen with him, right? And then, of course, he starts training camp on the PUP list, and all we're talking about and all I'm focused in on is he still on the PUP list when they get to the end of training camp? Because if so, he's going to miss the first 4 games. It does not matter. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, Rap Sheet, he put this out, had this statement to make on the Christian Wilkins release, trying to summarize everything that had gone on. Check it out.
The Las Vegas Raiders with a stunner. Sources say Christian Wilkins, the prize of free agency just a year ago, has been informed of his release 1 year into a 5-year, $110 million deal. Has got much of that $57.5 million fully guaranteed. Already got a $20 million check of it this spring, already still in the books for about, I believe it is 8 this season. The Raiders deciding they are not moving forward with Christian Wilkins any longer. This has been an ongoing saga for many reasons for the Las Vegas Raiders, but on the field as it pertains to Wilkins, my understanding is the team wanted him to have surgery on his foot. He declined several medical opinions, ultimately decided he wanted to rehab this. It has been a battle to get him on the field. Certainly there has been discord as it relates to Christian Wilkins and the Raiders. He has now been released. An early training camp surprise for Pete Carroll, for John Spytek, and for the Las Vegas Raiders. Christian Wilkins is out.
Ian Rappaport of NFL Network just kind of summarizing what had been going on with Christian Wilkins and how this had all of a sudden become a battle. And right, a lot of folks saw, and I saw this on social media as well, right before training camp got started, Christian Wilkins, a video of him in the Raiders locker room, and he was dancing to some Backstreet Boys sound. And I don't know, I never knew how old that video was. If it was old, I know the Backstreet Boys were in Las Vegas, so it seemed like it was pretty current. But if, they took away his money back in June, I can't imagine that in July he was in the Raiders weight room having a good time and dancing and celebrating and all that. So that to me kind of caught me off guard. But this right here is what I thought really were the words that really kind of let you know where this staff is and how they felt about this situation. And matter of fact, before I even read the statement, think about this. Remember on Tuesday when Pete Carroll opened up the training camp with his press conference, and the first question by Vinny Bonsignore was that about Christian Wilkins and is there any timeline? And he was very short. Like, he didn't have hardly anything to say. When back in OTAs and mandatory minicamp, he was very detailed about the situation. He was saying it was frustrating, but they were going to do everything that they could, to make sure he was back. At this time, he was like, there's no timetable. Right? He was very short and moved on. So that to me, is all playing back in my mind. But this statement from the Raiders on the release of Christian Wilkins, I thought was a very powerful statement. They said, "We have decided that it is the best interest of the organization to move on from Christian Wilkins, and he has been informed of his release from the team. This franchise has a commitment to excellence on and off the field. With no clear path or plan for future return to play for Christian, this transaction is necessary for the entire organization to move forward and prepare for the new season." Again, I thought that was a hell of a message by the Raiders. Normally when you see a statement made by a team on the release of a player or a trade of a player or even a firing of a coach, it's just like, hey, we'd like to thank them for their time with the organization, and we wish them best on their future endeavors, yada yada yada. It's like cookie cutter, just replace the name, this, that, and the other, and whatever they did. If it's a release, it's a release. If it's a firing, it's a firing. But normally that's kind of what it is. That's not what that statement was at all. Again, we've decided that it is in the best interest of the organization to move on from Christian Wilkins. He has been informed of his release from the team. This franchise has a commitment to excellence on and off the field with no clear path or plan for future return to play for Christian. This transaction is necessary for the entire organization to move forward and prepare for the new season. And that's exactly what this Raiders organization is going to do.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO. giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Some concerning symptoms puts Bill Self in the hospital. Scary news.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Here is the news in case you missed it. This was a release from KU Athletics about Bill Self. They said, Kansas men's basketball coach Bill Self felt unwell and experienced some concerning symptoms on Thursday. He was transported to Lawrence Memorial Hospital, where he had 2 stents inserted. The procedure went very well, and he is expected to make a full recovery. He is in good spirits and expects to be released from the hospital soon. So all that at the end is obviously very well. Procedure went well. He's expected to make full recovery, in good spirits, expected to be released from the hospital soon. Like, that is obviously all good news for Kansas and Bill Self. And of course, this comes a couple of years after the 2023, I don't know what the proper term would be for this, situation, whatever, that forced him to miss the rest of the Big 12 tournament, miss the NCAA tournament, where he had some sort of heart issue where he had to go in and I think get a stent done for that specifically. Now, I don't know for sure. Maybe you could connect dots and say, hey, if he had to get a stent for his heart in 2023, maybe you would say, I don't know, does that increase the likelihood that you would just assume that's what it's going to revolve around in 2025. It's not a guarantee, though. You can get stents in a lot of different things throughout your body. You can get it for, something as major as your heart with one of your valves. You can get it for something as major as, like, I think with your brain, like involving like strokes. You can get it for, I don't want to say minor. Anytime you're getting a stent, anytime you're getting something that is involving opening up, what is it, like blood vessels or whatever. Like, obviously that is a very, important. That is a very like scary, I guess, situation for you and your family to be in. But there are other parts that, like, if you have maybe a blood clot, possibly very dangerous situation. Obviously, if you have a blood clot, but the recovery from maybe having a blood clot and then figuring that out and like what your procedure is, what your the things you have to do as an outpatient are going to be a little bit different than if you got a stent done because your heart, something to your heart was blocked, right? So there are different kind of levels of this that we don't entirely know, like what it all is. And again, the fact that procedure went very well, expected to make full recovery, in good spirits, expected to be released from the hospital. Like, that's all great news for Kansas. That's all great news for Bill Self. That's all great news for his family. And like I said earlier, like I feel bad even doing this. Like, we should probably just cut the episode here. Like, there's the news. Like, boom, we're moving forward. At the same point in time, I know you come here for analysis. I know you might be listening to, okay, what does this exactly mean? And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if I wait to talk about what does this mean for a week, is that okay? But it's not okay right now? Or is this a situation where it's like when is the right time, right, to talk about it? Because at some point we do have to talk about what does this mean? Does it, handicap how long his coaching career could be at Kansas? Like, where does KU kind of go from here? So I do want to at least touch on that stuff while trying to be as sensitive to the situation as possible and understanding that the most important thing here is that Bill Self is healthy for him, for his family, for his own health. And that is what you're hoping out of all of this in a silly basketball game, or who's going to be the coach of the Kansas basketball team. Like, those sort of things, those can get figured out later. We're going to talk a little bit about them because that's what we do here on the show. But that is obviously the most important thing. Is Bill Self healthy for him and his family? So let's kind of switch gears and get to some of that stuff. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. So again, Bill Self hospitalized concerning symptoms was the exact quote that was given by Kansas Athletics. And obviously that can be a lot of different things, right? And obviously it was concerning enough to get a couple stints in there. So a good thing that everything was done in kind of an orderly and timely manner here. So, I mean, from a health perspective, obviously this is a huge deal. If we're talking about impact on the basketball season, which, as I said earlier, obviously pales in comparison to his health for him and his family. But this could be something that has, no impact on the season, on however long the rest of his coaching career is, ranging to the extreme of having a severe impact that very much handicaps the rest of Bill Self's coaching career in terms of limiting the amount of years or games coached that there could possibly be. And like I said earlier, part of what makes this difficult is you don't exactly know what the stints are for. You can assume one thing, you can assume something else, but like there are different severities to, what this could be. The lower range of severity is that he's back on the sideline, ready to go for the start of the season. It has no impact. The other end of severities is that and I hate to even bring this up because this is the worst case scenario, right? Is there has to be at least a non-zero chance, could be 0.01%. I don't know, that Bill Self has already coached his last game on the sidelines of Kansas. Again, I think that's an unlikely scenario. That's not one that I'm pointing to, though. I have no idea. I'm not looking at the, medical charts, and nor would I know what I was looking at if I was. But I think the natural question here would be, does this increase the likelihood of early retirement, so to speak, for Bill Self? There was already some scuttlebutt, the right term, I don't know, people discussing, could this upcoming season be Bill Self's last year at Kansas? And I have no idea if there was truth to that or what. I also kind of was someone who you could convince either way, that if you told me he had so much fun coaching Darren Peterson, he's like, I'm going to come back for another year after that, versus maybe, I don't know, do you see it as a send-off year? I have no idea. Now, if it was a plan to be this is going to be my last season, does it speed up that timeline, or does it cement it? Does it guarantee that that's going to be the situation? I just can't help but think, you go back to the 2023 situation, and obviously if this is heart related, obviously the 2023 one was, we'll see what this one is. But it's hard for me not to think about the stresses that a college basketball, any college coach undergoes, just in general, but especially in today's day and age of everything going on, because it's not a situation anymore where, okay, well, I'm going to go take a month off trip during the off season. There is no off season anymore. There's constantly, you're working on, the transfer portal. You're working on high school recruiting. You're working on NIL. You're working on raising funds for your NIL for your current players and your future players. You're working on, oh no, this player just came into my locker room and is now asking for, $100,000 more because they think they're better than this other player on the team. And they ended up, talking it out and figuring out that, hey, he's making more than I am, and I want to be making as much, if not more than he is. There's so much more you have to deal with from a stress level. And then think about the standpoint of recruiting now, where it used to be about maybe this or that. And now it maybe is a bit more about the dollars and cents, to where the back and forths with agents, the ups and downs of recruiting, the, hey, they're going to come and then they don't, the situations of feeling like you got fished a little bit. That's going to happen more often in the current structure. And that is very, very stressful. So you wonder if it does speed things up. Because you can just think it's an every day of the year job now, and it's very stressful each and every probably one of those days. Now, even if this is more of a minor thing, like I said, where he is back coaching the first game of the season and it doesn't have an impact there, it has to at least get you thinking as an individual, hey, this is starting to happen more often now. It at least makes you look in the mirror a little to be okay, how long do I want to do this? How long do I have in me? It starts to become more of a question. And it's would I be better off just not having these stresses and going, living on a beach somewhere and just fishing, and I can watch the occasional college basketball game if I really want to, So it'll be very, very interesting, right? And so I don't know what the impact is. Certainly this doesn't lengthen the time that you would think he's going to be a head coach. I should also mention, though, I do remember Coach K went through all sorts of medical stuff over the course of the back, I don't know, decade, 15 years of his coaching career at Duke. And he still was bouncing through that stuff, and then he'd find his way back on the sideline. So there is no guarantee that this has an impact at all. Maybe it just revitalizes, I guess, Bill Self to where he's he misses not being out there when he doesn't have the opportunity to do so. But obviously it is a very scary situation.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Gametime Zone Deals pick the best deals in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concerts and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Notre Dame just landed one of their top quarterback targets in the class of 2027.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Notre Dame just landed Teddy Gerard, a 4-star quarterback in the class of 2027, who could be the future face of the program. So I'm going to give you the full breakdown of his game, how the Irish landed him, and what it means for the future of the quarterback room. Then we're going to zoom out and talk about how Marcus Freeman has completely changed the game when it comes to quarterback recruiting. Names like Kenny Minchey, CJ Carr, and now Teddy Gerard show just how much the standard has been raised at Notre Dame. Finally, we're going to dive into the latest twist in the recruitment of Elijah Golden, Notre Dame's top target left on the board in the class of 2026. He pushed his commitment date back 2 weeks, which is usually a red flag, but I still like where the Irish are at. I'm going to explain why at the end. But first, let's dive into Teddy Gerard's background, his recruiting profile. So he's listed at 6'3", 190 pounds, and he plays for North Cobb High School. He's from Kennesaw, Georgia. And right now, he is ranked as the number 15 quarterback in the country and the number 195 player overall on the 24/7 Sports Composite. But the rankings are kind of all over the place. That's why I like to go with the composite to try to average them all out. But Rivals has Gerard as the number 2 quarterback in the class and a top 100 prospect. Meanwhile, 24/7 Sports in their own rankings have him pegged as a 3-star and the number 18 quarterback in this class. This isn't that uncommon to have such an extreme disparity in rankings among services because he's still very young. He still has 2 more high school seasons to play before he even steps foot on campus. But Gerard's stock has really skyrocketed over the summer. He's been to a bunch of different camps. He was a top performer at Ohio State's 7-on-7 camp. He also performed really well at the Rivals camp a few weeks ago. We had Locked On recruiting insider Brian Smith on the show, who was at the Rivals camp. He said he was really impressed by what he saw from Teddy Gerard. And the important thing here is that the Notre Dame coaching staff identified Teddy Gerard and Peyton Houston as their top 2 quarterback prospects in this class, and they were able to land him. So this is a big win for Gino Guidugli, Mike Denbrock, Marcus Freeman, the entire Notre Dame coaching staff. And their approach to quarterback recruiting in this class has been interesting, to say the least, right? I've been pretty critical of the approach, but it worked out in the end. So, I can question Gino's process here, but it ultimately worked out because they got their guy. So it's been well documented that Notre Dame waited until June 21st of this year to extend a single scholarship offer to any quarterback in the class of 2027. This is pretty uncommon because usually quarterback recruiting, that cycle is heavily advanced and guys commit very early on in their process. So guys are already starting to commit to different schools by the time Notre Dame had even offered anyone. And they only picked 2 guys. They kind of went all in on Gerard and Peyton Houston. And at this point, it looks like Peyton Houston is going to commit elsewhere. And this is just a big change from the previous cycle when they already had Noah Grubbs committed by June 1st of last year. And the reasoning that we had heard was that they wanted to evaluate all these guys in person, and their timelines were pushed back a little bit because of the run to the national championship. They went deep into the calendar, obviously, played the 16th and final game of the college football season, so they had to make up some ground on the recruiting trail. But ultimately, Notre Dame was able to make up ground quickly with Gerard, despite the fact that they offered him pretty late in the process. And ultimately, Teddy picked Notre Dame over Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. At one point, it felt like Clemson was the leader for Gerard, but they landed a commitment from Kareem Hewley on July 10th. And once that happened, Teddy narrowed down his list. And ultimately, the relationships with the Notre Dame staff were a key factor here. And Teddy has made it clear in interviews he wants to go to a place where he can compete for the job early, and that might be possible at Notre Dame depending on how Noah Grubbs and Blake Hebert develop. And even though Notre Dame waited a really long time to offer Teddy Gerard, they were obviously in pretty consistent communication with him leading up to this process. The one thing that I will give Gino and the staff credit for in the way that they handled this was they were very transparent to all the quarterbacks that they were recruiting, that they were going to approach it a little bit differently. They were going to wait to extend that offer, and they were only going to extend it to a few guys early on. So at least the communication was what it should be, and I think that's a big reason why they were able to land Gerard here just a few weeks after they officially offered him a scholarship. So what is Notre Dame getting in Teddy Gerard? a guy who already has a lot of playing experience despite the fact that he's only a rising junior at the high school level. He started on the varsity team as a true freshman, which is a big accomplishment in and of itself. Like, I can't even imagine playing and starting varsity as a true freshman. Now, granted, I'm not nearly as good of an athlete as Teddy Gerard is, and I was 5'2", 105 pounds soaking wet when I started high school. Luckily, I grew a little bit, but when I first started playing high school football when I was a freshman, I remember walking in on the first day of weight training in the summer, and some of the seniors looked at me like I was psychotic, like I was a sixth grader shadowing for whatever reason. Then I actually stepped in the weight room. They're like, oh my God, this poor kid is actually signing up to play. That was 1 year, finally hit my growth spurt, kinda. I'm still not very, very tall, but that was just, it's funny to look back and think about, wow, there's no way I could have started on varsity as a true freshman. Meanwhile, Teddy Gerard is doing it at quarterback, and he performed well his freshman season. He completed 153 of 260 passes, which is right around 59% for over 2,000 yards, and had 18 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. But he followed up that season with a breakout year as a sophomore, in which he completed 209 of 291 passes, which is a nearly 72% completion percentage, a big increase from his freshman season, threw for over 2,600 yards, 31 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions. Shout out to my guy, Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated for the stats there. So clearly, based on this progression from his freshman year to his sophomore year, you can tell that Gerard is becoming way more accurate, and I think a big reason why is his work ethic. Everything you hear about him, he has really intense work ethic, and it's starting to show on the field. So you think about how much he's progressed from his freshman year to his sophomore year. Just think, if he stays on that trajectory, how good he could be by the end of his senior season in high school. I think in time, he's going to have to get stronger, develop more power, but he's off to a great start. And even though his high school doesn't use him a lot in the designed run game, I think he's a very good scrambler. Watching his film, it honestly kind of reminds me of Ian Book and his ability to escape pressure. He has a knack for getting first downs, and when guys get in the backfield, he has a nice spin move, which is a signature of Ian Book. He can get out of the pocket, and he continues to look downfield. There's this great play where he rolls out to his right. He has a ton of time to throw. He's literally yelling to the wide receiver who is on the left side of the field while Gerard is on the right hash to go downfield, go to the end zone. Gerard lofts it up. Receiver makes a great play for a touchdown. But it's those kinds of plays that get you excited. Sometimes he has a tendency to throw off his back foot, but I think that's just because he's such a good athlete. He knows that he can still make the throw. He's going to get better at that in time. Again, he is still so young, and when he sets his feet and throws, he rifles the ball in there. So he's a really exciting prospect. And I personally think that Gerard has a little bit more potential, like a higher ceiling than Noah Grubbs and Blake Hebert. But those guys will be on campus well before Gerard, especially Blake Hebert, who's already been on campus at Notre Dame. So I do think that Gerard is going to have a chance to compete for the job early on in his career, because think about it this way. Whoever wins the quarterback competition, whether it be CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie, they're going to be the starter, hopefully, in 2025, 2026, maybe even 2027. I mean, I guess the best case scenario would be that whoever wins this job ends up starting the next 3 years. But if they're really, really good, then they're probably going to leave for the NFL after 2026. But again, that is a long way down the road. But say they wait until 2027, right? Or they're around Notre Dame until 2027. That would be down to Grubbs, Hebert, and now Gerard. And considering Grubbs and Hebert are both looked at as developmental prospects, like who knows where they will be at that point in their career. And obviously this is a really long way. Who knows what's going to happen. But I think if Gerard develops how the staff hopes that he will, I think he's going to have a chance to compete to be the starter in his second year, which is 2028. Again, a long way down the road, but I think that's how his career projects at Notre Dame. He is now the third commit in the class of 2027. Sean Kraft was technically the first as a long snapper, and then linebacker Ellis McGaskin was the second, but it is very important to have your quarterback committed very early on, so then you can build the class around him. It becomes a much more enticing pitch to wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends when they know who their quarterback is going to be, especially when the quarterback is as good as Gerard. And it sounds like he's going to be a very active recruiter as well, which is what you want out of your quarterback. Like, I've been a little bit critical of how Notre Dame went all in on Noah Grubbs very early, and they turned down Dia Bell, who is now a 5-star and committed to Texas. But one thing that you have to give Noah Grubbs a ton of credit for is that he has recruited his ass off to get other players to commit to Notre Dame. Like, whenever you hear about receivers and running backs committing, they all talk about how Noah was a big part of their recruitment and just how he was on them all the time talking up Notre Dame. So that is what you want in your quarterback commit. It looks like that's what Notre Dame is getting in Teddy Gerard, because these guys travel all around the country. They're going to a bunch of different camps. They're going to all these like elite showcases and things like that. And they're going to be competing with the best recruits in the country. So if you have a player like that committed this early on, especially at quarterback, it helps a ton. So overall, I didn't love the process to get here, but I love the end result because Notre Dame won big by getting Teddy Gerard to commit. So hats off to Gino Guidugli, man. I was critical of him and how he approached this process, but he got his guy. It's a big win for him and this Notre Dame team.